Hi, I'm David Breakspear. You may have seen me before. I'm an ex-prisoner, but I'm also someone that has or was diagnosed with ADHD. So for me, neurodiversity in the criminal justice system is an extremely important subject. And joining me today, I'm really pleased to say, is MP and someone that's dyslexic themselves, Matt Hancock. Matt, good to meet you.
It's great to be here.
Um, I'm going to start off with your dyslexia bill, Matt, because I know that you're going to be taking that back through Parliament again.
Yeah,
You've made some changes.
yeah.
What change you made?
So a couple of years ago, I tried to change the law in Parliament to say that you had to have early screening for dyslexia for every child in primary school,
Okay.
and then teacher training as well. And they've done the teacher training. They've put some in. There's more to go. But they didn't want to have it in law. The government didn't. So it didn't go through. And I've just found out last couple of weeks ago that I've got a new slot to introduce this bill. But instead of just doing a dyslexia screening bill, instead I'm going to introduce a neurodiversity screening and teacher training bill. The idea being that with technology now, you can screen for all sorts of neurodiversities much more easily. And there's so much overlap, isn't there, between dyslexia, ADHD, ADD. And so that is coming before Parliament, 23rd of April, St George's Day. And I've got cross-party support for it. And so I'm gonna give that a big push because, if we can get that identification in school and people can get the support that they need from primary school age, then that the school to prison pipeline, if people have a neurodiverse condition and don't get the support they need, then we can try to break that link.
And of course, this is going to be going out to people in prison.
Yeah.
So your screening bill, what's that going to mean for people in prison or people in the criminal justice system?
Yeah. Well, I want to see the same sort of screening in prison as I hope we'll get in primary schools. It's how you treat somebody and help somebody through is just different if they're neurodiverse. And I mean, your story speaks to this. And I fortunately, I'm very good at maths. So I got through school on my maths. But I felt like I was just rubbish at English and at languages until I was 18. And then I got identified as dyslexic, and it all made so much sense to me. But we know that if you don't get that early support, for far too many people, that means that they end up on the wrong side of the law and in prison. And once you're there, you can't. If you don't get identified, you won't get the right support. So this bill is specifically for schools to stop that pipeline and get people, over a generation, get that early identification. I haven't proposed this as a law for prisons because we just need to make it happen, right? It doesn't take a law. The MOJ can get on with it, and they have been making some progress.
And of course, now, in the last, 18 months, I believe, we now have the neurodiversity support managers in prison. So This is something, hopefully, that they carry forward.
Yes.
If it all comes to fruition.
Well, I hope the combination of the technology being far better now at spotting if you've got ADHD or dyslexia or autistic, and the availability of that technology in prisons, plus some of the prisons that are really on the leading edge of this have shown the way. You were telling me about Park Prison, which I haven't been to, but you went to have a look.
Yeah, Park Prison for me are a benchmark of the prison system. Although they're a private prison, so obviously there are a lot more resources available, but the way that they deal with neurodiversity there is incredible. And Alice Jones, who is one of the architects behind neurodiversity support managers, she began her life as a tutor at Park.
Right.
So I think she was a music teacher, and is also dyslexic herself. So she obviously is really aware of the impact that being neurodiverse in prison has on someone.
Yeah.
I mean, just having the ability to be able to read is something that provides so much independence. And this is why I love doing stuff for Coracle.
Right.
Because when I was in the criminal justice system, when I was in prison, nothing like this existed. Nothing like Coracle online pads existed. We didn't really talk about neurodiversity in the criminal justice system as much.
Yeah.
I think the only thing we spoke about around neurodiversity is autism, but that wasn't at that point linked to prison. So the conversations that we're having around neurodiversity in the criminal justice system is fantastic. Something like your bill coming out is also fantastic. But of course, we're only talking about screening. What about support following screening?
Yeah, well, that's got to flow.
Yep.
But you can't manage what you don't measure. So, and you know, let's think about your example. When you found out that you had ADHD, what difference did that make?
I'll be honest, at first, not a lot, because I was so far gone down the line. I was 41.
Yeah.
And I still had a couple of prison sentences left in me.
Yeah.
So I wasn't in the right place, mindset, attitude, whatever it was, environment, whatever it was, a combination of all of those things. But when I got my diagnosis, and I received it alongside a diagnosis of several personality disorders as well, I suppose I've become angry, but I self-medicated even heavier.
Right.
Alcohol, drugs,
Right.
Basically anything I could to, I want to say, mask the pain, but I don't suppose it was pain, it was confusion.
Right.
I didn't know who I was. For years, I've been struggling for an identity. And this is why I get kind of, I don't blame the adults around me when I was a child as much, although I do blame them for labelling me as challenging and disruptive too quickly. And that was a label that I was too quick also to play up to.
Right.
But we didn't know back in the 80s what we now know.
Yeah.
We're not aware as much now as we were then. So as much as I'm kind of frustrated in my own life, it is what it is. It's too late to change it now. And that's why I'm such an advocate for neurodiversity in the criminal justice system, because people who are neurodivergent have a high prevalence in the criminal justice system.
Absolutely.
Especially in prison.
Massive.
And personally, for me, I believe it's high time that we just assume that anyone that comes into contact with the criminal justice system is neurodiverse.
Right.
Unless they find out otherwise.
Right.
And we need to swap that around, because otherwise prisons will continue to be full of people with undiagnosed conditions.
Right. Assume that there's a neurodiverse condition going on there. But the question is to work out what it is, and it won't be the case with everybody, but it will with a lot. And tell me about what you think the neurodiversity support managers should be doing in prisons, because I've met a couple. I have to say they're inspirational people, impressive. Hard though, as a single person, to influence a whole prison. You know, you've got to you've got to have the governor on side. I think it's a really positive initiative from the MOJ, but dropping one into every prison, it will take some time to see the results. So what would you want to see as a result of that?
Well, for a start, I'd like to see neurodiversity support managers become more involved in the induction process in prison.
Induction,
that is where the first opportunity for someone in the prison is for them to go through screening. Not so much in reception when someone first comes in. For me, I believe that anyone going into prison, the first week, we should be interested or focused on their well-being and their health.
Right.
They're not going anywhere. I don't mean that in a derogatory way, but they're not going anywhere. It's fact.
Right.
Unless they get a pardon from the king.
Right.
So the kind of rules and the regulations of prison life, if you like, can come secondary or can be embedded.
Yeah.
Whilst first impressions count.
Yeah.
And for me, over the years, I mean, I've spent a long time in prison, over many, many years. And the best education that I received in prison was to gain a knowledge of who I was, whilst understanding who I could be.
Okay.
And I'd done that, I suppose, through working with my peers. I was a mentor in prison.
Yeah.
So I was able to do things in prison that kept me active.
Yeah.
So therefore, my neurodivergency didn't really, I suppose, in a way, my personality, my character suited prison. Or in prison, I created a personality and a character that could do prison.
Right.
But then obviously I couldn't leave that at the gate when I come out.
Right.
And so, I couldn't bring it out with me. And I always done my prison to get out and not stay out.
Right, I see.
But again, that was because I didn't know how my brain works. I was always working against my brain because I didn't have that information available to me.
Yeah.
But when I did get the information available to me with the diagnosis, I wasn't in the right state of mind to be able to accept it and see it for what it was.
Yeah. So in the case of dyslexia, there's an awful lot of of people in prison whose reading is not as good as it
I believe
needs to be.
62%, the last figures from the Shannon Trust.
Yeah, I've got a primary school reading age, right?
Yeah.
And getting that literacy support in as well. So understanding yourself as a personality, but also getting the support and helping motivate people in prison to learn to read is an important part of that. How can we do that?
You got to understand that a lot of people that go through prison had a very poor education background,
right?
And therefore they're either mistrustful of education or they're mistrustful of the system. So if you keep calling it education,
right,
people are going to be afraid of it. And it's been, if you like, ammunition against them for most of their life. Education has been hit with it,
right,
rather than supported through it,
right.
And as an education mentor for me, one of the best things that I found out was to find out what it was. Authentic inquiry is called. Where you speak to people and find out what they're interested in. And I used to be able to help people in a way that was about something that. So, for an example, one guy who was my learner when I was a Shannon Trust mentor, teaching him to read, I was also helping him with maths.
Right.
And golf, he loved golf.
Right.
So I introduced golf into the maths, and he didn't realise himself how mathematical golf was.
Right.
He just enjoyed the sport, but he knew what an eagle, an albatross, one under par meant, one over par, a bogey, double bogey. He knew what all those meant. He understood the yardage and all of those sort of things, but he didn't link it to maths. And the thing is with people like that, once you unlock that confidence in them, the world's their oyster. Once they start to believe in themselves, the world's their oyster. But if you've got undiagnosed neurodivergent conditions in the background, you'll never be able to move forward because they're always holding you back.
Yeah.
So I understand that some people talk about being like, I mean, I'm very much someone that's anti-label, being labelled most of my life. But having ADHD or having dyslexia, they're not labels. They're opportunities for you to be able to move forward with your life, doing things what it is that you want to be able to do.
Yeah. Well, I feel very strongly about that. The evidence is really clear. And also because then you treat yourself differently and other people.
You start to see other people differently. And funny enough, when I turned my own life around and come like that, I started to then feel guilt and remorse for all the stuff that I'd done.
Right.
And I had to deal with that towards the end of my sort of criminality lifestyle, if you like.
Right.
That was a bit of a shock to me. I didn't know how to deal with that.
Yeah.
But fortunately, I kind of had all these jigsaw pieces from my past that I was then able to put together.
Right.
Being neurodiverse is one of those that completed the full picture for me. And the reason why I'm sitting here talking to you today as someone that's been able to turn their life around. Without being diagnosed, that bit would have been missing. I would have been able to finish.
So it's the support is critical, isn't it? After the diet.
Support's massive. Yeah, I mean, one reason why I'm so successful this time was because of the first time after 9 releases, I had through the gate support.
Okay.
And without that through the gate support, I wouldn't have been able to, I suppose, use their language, reintegrate myself back into society in the right way.
Yeah.
Having good intentions in prison is one thing.
Yeah.
Turning your life around in prison is another. But if you come out of prison, there's no support.
Yeah.
It's quite easily to slip back to what you already knew.
Yeah.
You have to have support, and especially if someone who is neurodivergent and they come out of prison, they've got all these appointments they've got to go to.
Right.
If there's no support there, hand-holding support. It doesn't have to be an expert in someone that's an expert in neurodivergent conditions. Just someone that knows how to support someone, how to hold their hand, how to help them engage with the services that are going to make their difference, if you like, they're going to make the difference to their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. And understanding that person for who they are and how it works.
And that's the thing that gets me about neurotypical.
Right.
If every single mind is different, how can there be anything that's neurotypical? We're all neurodiverse. So let's start looking at things from a platform of neurodiversity and not from this platform of neurotypicality or whatever you want to call it.
Well, I guess it's important, isn't it, that some people respond particularly badly to situations because of how their brain works. So
they don't know themselves. I didn't know. sort of a quarter of my brain, be like, what are you up to? What are you doing this for? What are you doing this for?
Right.
But the other 3/4 of the brain were like, shut up and carried on.
Right.
Because you don't understand it yourself. We want these people to understand right from wrong and to take responsibility for their actions. And don't get me wrong, I'm responsible for my own actions throughout my life. But there are reasons behind it, not excuses.
Yeah.
I mean, I was sexually abused. I mean, I had a messy childhood.
Yeah.
Other people that have messy childhoods don't end up in the criminal justice system. Good luck to them.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, far too many do.
Yeah. I think that the distinction between a reason and an excuse is really important, because you can believe that actions have consequences and believe in right and wrong. But at the same time, by trying to understand the reasons behind somebody's criminal behaviour, you can help them to to get out of that cycle. And the two fit together. And understanding how the brain is wired has got to be at the centre of that.
Well, I think we're coming to the end of our time, Matt. So I'm going to let you close our show. What would you like to say to people in prison around neurodiversity?
I'd like to say, let's recognise it. Let's try to work out how different people's brains work, right? Let's embrace this technology that can much more easily help people to understand. And of course that's important for everybody else to know. But my lived experience, not having been to prison, is that my identification really helped me. And you've talked about how over time it helped you. It was the support that you got because of it that mattered over time, rather than the identification itself. But let's be open-minded to this, and let's try to get as much information on how people work as possible, because that's the best way to help people.
Matt, thank you very much.
Good stuff there.
Thank you very much. Thank you.